2 spookily haunted 4th of July stories exposed, sinister secrets and unexplained terror revealed. The aroma of sizzling burgers wafted through the air, mingling with the distant crackle of fireworks, yet Ben Roberts felt a chill run down his spine. Beneath the laughter and jubilant shouts of children playing, a sinister undercurrent pulsed through his suburban neighborhood. Ben, a weary 32-year-old, had trudged through another night shift, and while families gathered in the fading light, his heart raced with an unshakable dread. As he poured himself a drink, the sound of a creaking floorboard echoed in the silence of his empty home. For every burst of laughter outside, a voice inside him whispered that everything was off. Had he seen the shadow shift past his window that night, too tall and too swift to be any neighbor? The thought gnawed at him as unease settled heavily on his chest. Out by the grill, parents shared cool beverages and bright smiles, masking the darkness that crept in the corners of their eyes. Ben's phone buzzed. The Ring camera had picked up something. His heart raced as he opened the app, the footage revealing nothing more than a fleeting figure, just a blur against the night. Darkness clawed at him, its weight pressing down until his breath quickened. The neighborhood, so picturesque from a distance, now felt like a web of lies, and the whispers of children's laughter, once so innocent, twisted into unnerving murmurs in his mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As dusk deepened and fireworks exploded overhead, Ben approached the delighted parents cooking burgers, but their laughter felt rehearsed. What were they hiding behind those two wide smiles? Were they aware of the creeping darkness that seemed to cling to the edges of their perfect lives? Each interaction burrowed deeper into his thoughts, suspicion eclipsing the warmth and camaraderie he once felt. Meanwhile, miles away, Clara stood before an old farmhouse inherited from her late grandmother, the musty scent swirling around her like the ghosts of her childhood. Dust motes floated in the dim light as her fingers traced the ancient symbols etched into the walls, signs of the eerie 4th of July festival that had left behind a history of strange traditions and chilling disappearances. Clara's heart raced as she unearthed tales of those who had vanished during bright summer nights, lured into darkness by laughter that turned to screams. Then, as another crack of fireworks lit the sky, Ben caught sight of something lurking among the trees, shadowy figures emerging silently, their motives cloaked in malice. Time slowed, dread seeped into his bones, and he felt the palpable fear settling in a heavy knot in his stomach. This dark celebration, once a source of joy, had transformed into a terrifying unknown. With every burst of light overhead, Ben and Clara, worlds apart, could feel the noose tighten, binding them to an ancient pact of fear and silence. As Ben's instincts screamed at him to protect his family, he had no idea the darkness was about to swallow them whole. Would they see the truth before it was too late, or would they become victims of this sinister legacy? The flickering lights of firecrackers punctuated the darkness, casting shadows that danced unnaturally across the lawn. Ben stood frozen, his heart pounding wildly against his ribcage, as the figures slipped further into the blackened trees. Sweat dripped down his back, the cold air mocking him, while whispers snaked through the leaves like serpents. He took a step back, every instinct telling him to run, but curiosity tugged him toward the unknown. "Ben! Are you all right?" came a voice, breaking his trance. It was Mike, his cheerful neighbor, holding a half-eaten hot dog. "Yeah. I'm fine." The words felt hollow. He plastered on a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mike's grin faltered just a bit, concern lacing his brow, but it vanished as another round of fireworks burst above, momentarily illuminating the evening. "Come on. You've got to join us. The kids are having a blast," Mike urged, his voice light but edged with impatience. "Sure, in a minute," Ben mumbled, eyes still trained on the darkened woods. But all he could think about were the shapes. Those figures moved too quickly, too deftly, and a thought curled in his mind: what if they were not of this world? Ben turned away, forcing his feet to carry him back toward the gathering. The naivety of their laughter gnawed at him, but he joined in, chuckling as a child accidentally set off a string of firecrackers prematurely. The chorus of giggles did nothing to settle his nerves. Shadows continued to whirl in his thoughts, drowning him in an ocean of unease. Meanwhile, miles away, Clara traced her fingers over the rough wooden table in the farmhouse. Her grandmother's stories echoed in her mind, tales of festive joys under the stars that ended in horror as people vanished into the night. She had pushed the stories aside, assuming them to be mere folklore. Now, they clung to her like a wispy fog. In the crisp silence of the old house, a faint echo floated up from the basement, a sound like muffled sobs, mixing with ghostly laughter. Clara's heart skipped. She hesitated, glancing around as if someone might step through the gloom behind her. She could almost hear the voices, sweet and inviting, beckoning her to join them. No. She shook her head, dismissing the intrusive thoughts. Her grandmother's words surged back: never follow the laughter when the stars are bright. Yet, the sobs continued, weaving a web of dread around her. Tempted, she felt her feet drift toward the basement door, drawn by an inexplicable pull. As firecrackers exploded above, their brilliant colors faded, replaced by a thickening tension in the air. She opened the creaking door, heart racing, plunging into darkness below. Back in the neighborhood, the strange figures loomed larger in Ben's mind, forming twisted shapes in the corners of his vision. I need to check the kids, he whispered to himself, a chill racing down his spine. He took a deep breath and walked back toward the house, the laughter of parents suddenly grating against his nerves. Anxiety knotted in his throat. Then he stopped. Silence smothered the joyful noise, as if the very world was holding its breath. Eyes darting around, he glanced down the dimly lit pathway. No kids. Where are they? He muttered, his palms sweating. Just then, a scream pierced the night, sharp and sudden, followed by a hesitant silence that left an almost deafening echo. Clara reached the bottom of the stairs, her breath hitching. All around her, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. The darkness thickened as she stepped further in. What are you doing? She shouted into the void, the dread clawing at her heart. The basement seemed alive, reverberating with something sinister. Ben. Clara. Two names echoed into the expansive night, unheard but felt, intertwined in an ancient bond of terror. As time waned on this cursed 4th of July, both were destined to discover what awaited them in the shadows, secrets buried beneath layers of fear and false comfort. But would they face it together, or would they become pawns in a game played by unseen hands? Ben's heart raced, the echo of that scream still vibrating in his ears. Mike, he called, panic lacing his voice. The laughter and chatter of the neighborhood had vanished into an unsettling void. He could feel the weight of the night pressing down, smothering any sense of joy that had briefly flickered like the last firework lighting the sky. He quickened his pace towards the house, a primal fear kicking in. The moon hung low, casting its ghastly light on the abandoned toys littering the lawn, bikes, balls, even a forgotten doll, all illuminated in stark detail like a post-apocalyptic scene. Where are the kids, he thought, an icy knot forming in his gut. All thought of the figures in the woods faded. Only concentrated dread remained. He pushed through the front door, the familiar sound of creaking hinges now more ominous than welcoming. Inside, the silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional crack from the old wooden floors under his feet. Anyone? He called again, his voice trembling, almost swallowed by the shadows. The house that once felt like home now dripped with uneasiness. He moved towards the hallway, his pulse thumping louder with each step. Just as he reached the living room, a figure flashed past the window, a small silhouette darting outside. Emily, he shouted, recognizing his daughter's build. He bolted toward the door, but it swung open before he could reach it. A gust of chilling wind swept in, and for a heartbeat, he stood frozen, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. Where, he started, but again, that scream echoed, not from the direction of his daughter but from deep inside the house, the basement. A voice, soft and pleading, tangled in the darkness, and the sobs merged into distant laughter, sending shivers down his spine. Ben raced toward the basement door, the breath hitching in his throat as he reached for the cold, rusted handle. It felt wrong, as if the door was a threshold to something best left undiscovered. He hesitated, every ounce of reason telling him to turn back, yet the desperate need to find his family propelled him forward. The door creaked open, revealing a darkness so thick it felt tangible. He flipped the light switch, but the bulb flickered weakly before finally dying, plunging him into an oppressive blackness. The sobs grew louder, resonating from the depths below, more frantic, as if they were pleading for help. "Stay together, please," Ben whispered to himself, stepping into the dark. His foot touched something cold and slimy. He recoiled, his heart racing. What the hell? He couldn't tell if it was mud or something more grotesque, but he pressed on, inching down the steps one at a time. Clara was still in the basement, drawn deeper into the dense shadows by an unseen force. "Get out," she murmured to herself. The knowledge of the stories wrapped around her brain like chains. Those who entered the void seldom returned whole. She could feel a presence, not just whispers but the weight of eyes watching her, hungry and lurking. "Ben!" she shouted, her voice shaking. But no answer met her. Only the faint sound of something moving, something that echoed what her mind had half conjured and half feared. She grasped for reason, heart pounding, racing against the sinister pull of the haunting echoes. Then, a cold breath tickled her neck. She wheeled around, eyes straining against the abyss. Is someone there? Panic surged through her veins. The shadows shifted unnaturally, closing in like tendrils of darkness. They brushed against her skin, chilling her to the bone. Just then, the basement door slammed shut above, the sound reverberating like thunder, and the sobs turned to gales of laughter that echoed through the stifling air. In that moment, Ben turned on his heel, desperate to leave the basement, but the door was locked, the handle twisting uselessly in his grip. He was trapped, and all he could hear were the haunting whispers drawing closer. "Ben!" Clara's frantic voice floated up from the shadows, but it wasn't just a plea, it was a scream draped in utter dread. As the laughter crescendoed around them, a flicker of realization washed over Ben. Whatever lay behind that door did not want them to leave. Would they succumb to its mockery and despair, or fight against the inevitable? With adrenaline pumping, he called out one last time into the black void, knowing their fates hung in the balance. "Clara, hold on. I'm coming." But time slipped away, and the true horror of that enchanting night was just beginning to unfold. The walls of the basement seemed to pulse with a life of their own, the shadows converging like long, skeletal fingers wrapping around Ben's chest, choking the hope from his lungs. He pressed his ear against the cold, damp door, trying to catch any sounds from outside, but only the fading laughter echoed back at him, a sinister taunting from a hidden world. "Clara!" he cried again, his voice cracking against the oppressive darkness. But the silence that followed felt like a warning. He could almost hear his own heartbeat thundering, drowning out all else, while the hairs on his arms stood on end. He moved deeper into the basement, his feet squelching in the slimy muck. With each step, now hesitant and cautious, he sought a light flicker, something to banish the darkness engulfing him. It felt like a living entity, pushing into him, ready to swallow him whole. "Come on," he murmured, prying loose the words through clenched teeth, willing himself to be brave. "Just a little light." Just a little. It was then that he saw it, a soft glimmer, a faint light flickering from a corner buried in shadows. He felt drawn to it, like a moth to flame, even as dread whispered in his ear. What if it was a trap? What if the thought sent a shiver down his spine, but he couldn't turn back now. Moving towards the light, it widened with each step, illuminating bits of twisted metal and old furniture piled carelessly in the corner of the basement, discarded remnants of lives lived before. Then he saw something that made him freeze. A child's toy, a worn stuffed bunny, lay among the debris. Emily's favorite. He lunged forward, heart racing, picking it up with trembling hands. No, 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 he felt sick. Where are you, Em? A low, mocking laughter echoed in the depths, chilling him to the core. It was someone, or something, playing with them. Clara's voice emerged through the laughter, muddled but filled with terror. Ben, help. The urgency gave him strength, and he forced his feet to move, following the distant sound, trying to drown out the shadows wrapping tighter around him. But as he reached the edge of the faint light, an icy fear gripped him. Clara's cries morphed into whispers, swirling around him, repeating phrases he didn't want to hear. Join us, stay, Clara. He screamed again, desperation thick in his voice. I'm coming. The choice loomed in his mind like a dark specter, take the chance to fight back or succumb to whatever haunted this place. Without thinking, he pressed forward into the light, breaking through the veil of darkness. Suddenly, he was in a small room, its walls lined with old photographs that seemed to stare back at him, their expressions twisted in pain. Clara was in the center, pale and trembling, standing at a dusty table. Fear flared in her eyes, drawn to something unnatural resting there. Ben. She stood frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling, but he rushed toward her, intent on pulling her away, when his gaze fell on what held her captive. A mirror, funny, cracked but beautiful with intricate designs, but in its depths writhed the same shadows he had just fought to escape. They twisted and coiled, reaching outward, as if searching for a host. Don't look! He shouted, slamming his hand over her eyes just as the mirror began to pulse, a grotesque light seeping from its fractured surface. What's happening? Clara's voice came through, quivering, panic raw in her tone. Ben could feel the weight of something dark and heavy, the remnants of those trapped inside, pulling at his very essence. We need to go. But before he could reach for the door, the overwhelming fear washed over them, an avalanche of despair, swirling shadows threatening to drown them both. Just then, with one final effort, he yanked her away, but the grip of the mirror felt unyielding. A shrill scream pierced the air, echoing in a chorus that promised no escape. And then, darkness engulfed them, the laughter echoing louder than ever, like a chilling farewell as the basement began to close in around them. Stay close. He urged, sensing their time was running out, but Clara felt herself shaking with raw terror. Ben, what if it's too late? The ground trembled beneath their feet as something stirred behind them, a presence far more sinister than what they had encountered before. And in a moment of sheer despair, he understood the darkness would soon be their master if they couldn't find a way out. Hold on! He yelled, but deep down, a new fear took root. What if this battle was only the beginning? As the walls closed in, a flicker of desperation ignited within. But there were more shadows lurking just beyond their vision. The darkness pressed in around them, suffocating and thick. Ben could feel Clara's heartbeat matching his, a frantic race against an unseen enemy. Shadows danced on the edges of his vision, flickering ominously. Panic clawed up his throat as he scanned the room, desperately seeking an escape. Ben, please. What is happening? Clara's voice had turned breathy, close to tears. Stay behind me. He stepped protectively in front of her as the mirror pulsed again with that grotesque light, but now it seemed to beckon them. It flickered strangely, revealing its secret shapes twisting in the glass, tumbling in frantic motions, faces vying for attention. No, Ben whispered, an icy dread locking his limbs in place. What if these were the lost souls? What if Clara? Ben. Clara desperately tugged on his arm, breaking him from the mirror's hold. We have to go. Now. With a fierce determination, he turned and pushed through the door, barely managing to pull Clara along. The air shifted, static with tension, but freedom lay just a few feet away. Behind them, the laughter roared like a storm. It filled the small space, echoing in a maddening symphony. The piercing sounds wrapped around Ben's mind, filling every corner with dread. The basement's end loomed a staircase spiraling upward, flickering weakly with light painted by fear. Each step was precarious, the wooden treads creaking underfoot. With Clara pushing at his back, they climbed rapidly, but the mocking laughter chased them, a chilling reminder of what lurked in the dark. "Faster, Ben," Clara urged, her voice an urgent quiver. "I'm trying," he gasped, glancing back. Shadows twisted on the walls, crawling toward them, reaching with claw-like fingers. Suddenly, the ground beneath them jerked violently. Ben stumbled, falling against the railing. Clara gasped, grasping his shoulder with a grip like iron. A split-second decision to try and turn back or to keep pushing forward paralyzed him. "Ben. We can't go back. We have to keep moving." Her eyes were flooded with fear, and he felt the pulse of her anxiety matching his own. He pushed himself back upright, bolting up the remaining steps. Reaching the next level, they burst through a doorway, slamming it behind them. The heavy smell of damp wood mixed with a sharper scent like burnt ash filled the air. The room was a living nightmare, draped in darkness but illuminated by the faintest hue as shadows roamed just beyond the walls. "What is this place?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling. Ben's heart raced as he stepped cautiously into the room. Fragments of memories whispered in the corners: a table, covered in dust, chairs, overturned, and a shattered lamp swinging gently, as if a ghostly hand had just brushed against it. "We're not safe yet. We need to find No," Clara gasped. "Look!" He turned just in time to see a shape forming, rising from the corner, a silhouette of a child, small and distorted yet heartbreakingly familiar. It was Emily, her features twisting in an expression of pain. She seemed to reach out, crying silent tears that echoed in Ben's mind. "Emily?" He choked on her name, horror knitting itself into his skin. The apparition flickered, its eyes dark and watery. "Help us, No!" Clara screamed, collapsing back against the wall. Ben felt a torrent of emotions surge: sorrow, anger, guilt. "Emily!" He cried out, but the apparition twisted into a mist, merging with the walls, vanishing into nothingness. The room grew heavier, shadows thickening, feeding off their desperation. "What do you want from us?" Ben shouted, his voice a mixture of defiance and fear. "Join us," the walls whispered back, a chorus of despair echoing around them, enveloping them once again. "Run!" Clara yelled suddenly, snapping him back to the moment. They turned, scrambling for another door that beckoned like a dim star in a dark sky. But the darkness was relentless. As they barreled forward, something cold snatched at Ben's ankle. He fell hard against the floor, the laughter crescendoing into a maddening cacophony. "Clara, help!" She reached for him, but even as he struggled to get up, the laughter morphed into a ghastly wail. Shadows clawed at him from below, pulling, dragging, relentless. "Ben!" Clara's voice faded, swallowed by the surrounding darkness. "No! Clara!" But the shadows were too strong, each second dragging them further apart. He felt himself being pulled, stretched like a thread, and panic surged anew, thick and suffocating. A glimpse of light flickered in his peripheral vision, a last beacon. He fought against the tide of darkness, desperate to reach it. But what was it? Escape or another trap? He had to make a choice, and somewhere in the distance, laughter lingered dead and echoing, a chilling reminder of the fears that awaited them in the dark. Behind him, the shadows writhed eagerly. Would he make it to the light, or would it swallow him whole? Ben's body felt leaden, tangled in the grasp of the shadows. The laughter was a relentless tide, washing over him, filling every crevice with dread. Struggling against the cold fingers reaching for him, he caught sight of Clara's terrified face, fading into the abyss. "Clara!" He shouted once more, his voice cracking under the strain. Panic ignited in his chest like a wildfire. Was this it? Would darkness claim them both? With every ounce of strength, he clawed his way toward the light, each inch fought for with sheer desperation. The light flickered uncertainly, a cruel tease amidst the suffocating black. But he was drawn to it, a moth to a flame, if only because it was the only thing that promised a chance. Stay strong. He gritted through his teeth, urging himself forward. He felt the shadows ebbing, the grip loosening slightly as he surged again, vision narrowing to that beacon of hope. Finally, his fingers met a door frame, rough and unyielding. With a heave, he threw himself through, landing hard on the cool, wooden floor of what seemed to be another room. Behind him, the laughter faded into wails, a cacophony retreating as he gasped for breath, heart pounding like a drum in his ears. But Clara! Clara! He called again, looming dread freezing his pulse. He stood up, his limbs shaking, scanning the unfamiliar environment. The walls were lined with yellowing newspapers, headlines screaming tales of horror and pain. Where are you? Silence smothered him, thick and oppressive. His throat tightened. What if he lost her? He staggered forward, bending over the brittle paper cluttering the floor, each step a prayer. Where are you, please? Panic edged his voice, and he started calling her name, louder and more frantic, but the room responded only with silence. The light fixture above flickered, casting shadows that morphed into grotesque shapes, mocking his despair. He could almost feel their laughter vibrating the walls, like bells tolling for him. Then, from somewhere deeper inside the room, he heard it, a faint cry. His heart leaped. It was Clara. Clara. He turned, movement frantic as he staggered towards the sound. The walls closed in around him, heavy and swirling, the air thickening again with looming dread. Over here. Her voice sounded almost muffled, cutting through the suffocating quiet. He rushed towards a flicker at the corner of the room, a door ajar, a slant of grayish light spilling out. With each step, dread coiled tighter in his gut. What if it was a trap? Yet, as he reached the door, he couldn't back down now. Fear gripped him, but just like before, he pushed through, praying he'd find her on the other side. The moment he crossed the threshold, the room transformed completely. It was bright, too bright, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead stung his eyes. Clara stood at the center, her back turned, staring at an old television flickering erratically. Clara! He yelled, without turning. She lifted a finger, pointing at the screen, her skin pale and rigid. Ben, you have to see this. Her voice trembled uneasily. He rushed to her side and followed her gaze. The flickering screen showed static for a moment before focusing into grotesque images, half-formed faces twisted in torment, contorted bodies writhing in agony. Laughter erupted, and Ben's blood ran cold as he recognized that familiar sinister sound. It was the same laughter that had haunted them in the basement. Turn it off. Turn it off. He screamed, but as he reached for the TV, an unseen force knocked him back, pinning him to the floor. The shadows in the room began swirling around them again, creeping closer, feeding off their desperation. Suddenly, Clara turned to him, eyes wide, filled with terror and something else, an understanding, a knowledge that chilled him to the bone. We can't escape, Ben, it wants us. What had she seen? Desperation clawed at him, but the room began to spin, and the laughter swelled, engulfing them dark and triumphant. Then, as the shadows shrouded them once more, he caught a glimpse of a shape materializing within them. It was a figure. Familiar yet wrong, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural hunger. Join us, it whispered, each word laced with malice. As the darkness began to close in, Ben's pulse quickened, panic surging anew as he and Clara were swallowed by the shadows. Fight it! He yelled. But the force around him was unyielding. It was no longer just darkness. It was a call from the abyss beckoning them to surrender. And then was it silence? Was that hope? Or was it the last hollow breath of their impending doom? As his vision flickered, he realized he had to act before whatever was coming next sealed their fate forever. Ben felt the world shift, the darkness wrapping tighter around him, squeezing like a vice. Breathing became a chore as fear twisted in his gut. He fought against it, reminding himself that he had to get Clara back. Clara! He cried again, his voice rising above the maddening laughter that filled the room like 1,000 echoes. The shadows began to weave together, forming a tapestry of nightmares. And from that terrible weaving, the figure emerged. That same face that haunted his dreams, now slipped through the darkness with glistening eyes that hungered for something his soul, perhaps? Ben, Clara's uncertain voice broke through the swirling chaos. A flicker of hope ignited, but it was quickly extinguished by the figure's dark laughter. Ben, don't let it get to you. Just stay away from her. He shouted, pushing against the invisible weight pinning him down. He could see Clara struggling, her own form flickering beneath the oppressive shroud. Fight it! He yelled, repeating the words like a mantra, gripping onto the fragments of hope that still lingered. But the room pulsed, and everything around him warped. The walls closed in like a predator circling its prey. The grim figure moved toward him, its face stretching into a smile that wasn't right. Join us, it hissed, a rasping whisper that sent ice coursing through Ben's veins. He could see Clara's eyes pleading for him, as if she were trapped in a fog of despair, her essence fading. Clara! He begged, the sound tearing from his throat like a last breath. Ben! She reached out, her hand airy and translucent, a wretched reflection of the girl he loved. Desperation cut through him sharper than any knife. What was he supposed to do? He lunged forward, trying to break free, to find some strength within. But the shadows coiled tighter, suffocating him. It's all in your hands, Ben, the figure hissed, its voice like rusted blades scraping together. Choose wisely. The pulsing darkness throbbed, rhythm syncing with his frightened heartbeat. He could feel Clara just out of reach, could almost grasp her, but the darkness laughed mockingly around him. Choose. The figure commanded. Will you join her in oblivion? The question dug into him, rattling his resolve. Or will you be brave enough to tear her from my embrace? With every shred of his being, he knew he couldn't let go. Not now. Not ever. Clara! He screamed, his voice shaking as tears burned his eyes. The shadows clawed at him, pulling him back. Then unexpectedly, a flicker of light surged in the corner of his vision, a door. It was more than an exit, it was a realization. Every desperate thought focused on that shimmering light. Clara! We can escape. He brandished his will like a weapon, pulling against the shadowy tendrils. But just as he made progress, the figure lunged towards Clara, its hands reaching to claim her. No! He roared, his body moving instinctively as he tore from the grip, darting towards her. It felt as if gravity itself was resisting him, pushing him back, yet the light grew sharper, more defined. He could almost touch it. Come to me, Clara. He extended his arm, heart racing, pulling his fear into sheer determination, but just as Clara began to flicker into solid form, the figure shrieked, a sound that echoed through the very marrow of his bones. No one leaves. You'll regret this choice. Will still surged through him, igniting the part of him that knew this wasn't just about survival. It was a fight for their souls. The darkness ripped and tore at him, but he leaped forward. As he reached Clara, their fingers brushed the connection seared through him, electrifying his resolve. The shadows recoiled as if burned. The laughter transformed into screams of rage, a chorus of fury wrapping around them both. In that moment of unity, Ben plunged them into the light. And then the shadows gasped as they were consumed by the brightness, but before he could fully register their liberation, the ground began to tremble, the air shifting around them. The room shook, crashing sounds of chaos echoing through the walls. Had they escaped, or was this just another layer to the nightmare? As the brightness surrounded them, he heard a whisper, soft yet commanding. You think you've escaped? This is just the beginning. The floor opened beneath them, a swirling abyss gaping wider than the darkest night. Ben! Clara shrieked, terror filling her voice again, as they plunged downward into the unknown. What awaited them at the bottom? Would they ever find peace? Would they find each other again? The darkness beckoned, hinting at horrors yet to come. Falling felt endless. The sensation of weightlessness twisted in Ben's stomach as he grasped desperately for anything solid. Clara slipped through his fingers, just out of reach as they spiraled into confusion. The bright light snuffed out, leaving them in suffocating blackness that buzzed with sinister whispers. "Ben, I'm scared," Clara cried, her voice echoing around them, disappearing into the void. He shot his hands forward, searching, willing himself to close the distance. "Hold on." He tried to sound brave, but panic tinged his words. He couldn't lose her again. Suddenly, the bottom came with a hard thud. They landed on a cold surface, a dampness seeping into their clothes, the air thick with a musty scent. Ben blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light. As the shadows cleared, he saw they were inside a cavern, high walls lined with glistening crystals that flickered like dead stars. It was beautiful but wrong. The twisted architecture felt alive, pulsing softly as if mimicking a heartbeat. "Clara!" He called again, searching for her in the murky darkness. The pain of separation burned harder than before. "I'm right here." Her voice came from the shadows. Relief washed over him. He charged toward it, but something flickered between them. A shadow, darker than the tattooed night above them, danced just out of reach. Together, he whispered, the word of fragile promise. Gathering his strength, he forced himself forward. Then came the laughter again, that dissonant sound washing over him like ice water. "You think escaping the darkness will save you?" A voice hissed, emerging from the walls, each syllable curling like smoke. "Welcome to the abyss. You will either join the darkness or be devoured by it." Ben's heart raced, fear intertwining with defiance. "No!" he shouted, forcing back the shadows, feeling the cold dread creep through his veins. "We will not yield." The crystals above them flared with sudden intensity as if reacting to his boldness. A powerful light showered down from them, illuminating the cavern. He spotted Clara, her silhouette etched against the brilliant glow. He surged toward her, reaching out, but again the shadows rebuffed him. "Stop. What do you want?" he yelled, his voice echoing, bouncing against the cavern walls in mocking imitation. "Your feeble will binds you here," the voice sang, slippery like venom. "Only surrender will grant you peace." Clara shivered, stepping closer to him. "We can't listen to it, Ben. We have to fight." But as he met her gaze, he noticed something wrong. A dark shimmer tinged her eyes, like the taint of despair. "No, Clara," he whispered, dread curling in his gut. "It's tempting," she murmured, trailing off. There was a distance in her eyes, a subtle change as if the abyss was seeping into her. "No. Clara, don't let it in." Panic surged through him, his voice cracking. "Fight it." She seemed to falter, her resolve wavering under the weight of dark whispers promising solace. "Ben, it would be so easy." Shadows writhed at their feet, hungry for her, and he could see the shadows pooling in the corners, waiting for their moment. "Clara." He reached for her hand, his heart ready to shatter. "Don't. You're stronger than this." Suddenly, the ground trembled violently, sending a shockwave through him. The walls echoed with a cacophony of laughter and screams, and Ben felt the crushing weight of despair wrap around them both. A door appeared, jagged and sputtering with ominous symbols. "There's our chance." He pointed frantically, but Clara hesitated, her eyes filled with turmoil. "What if it's a trap?" she questioned, her voice quivering, teetering between hope and despair. "There's no time to think," he urged. "We have to decide." Before she could respond, the shadows surged, coiling around her legs like live serpents, dragging her down. "No!" Ben lunged forward, muscles screaming, desperation surging through him. "Clara." And in that moment, he understood, they would either face the darkness together or lose everything forever. What lay in store within the door? Maybe salvation or a deeper nightmare? The air thickened, and the walls closed in, suffocating. Would they walk through together, or was it already too late? Clara! Ben shouted, his voice slicing through the darkness, but it was quickly swallowed by the overwhelming cacophony around him. The laughter morphed into howls, a dark symphony of torment that pressed against his ears. He lunged toward the door, heart pounding, every nerve firing in a frantic plea for survival. The weight of Clara's absence surged like smoke, stinging his eyes and tightening in his chest. He couldn't let her go. He wouldn't lose her to this malevolent abyss. As he reached for the door, the shadows rippled and shivered, tugging at the edges of his mind like they were trying to whisper secrets meant for him alone. Then they hissed, laced with Clara's fading voice. "Join us." No. He gritted his teeth, shaking his head as if to cast out the darkness clawing at his sanity. "Clara! Grab my hand." The words felt inadequate. Would she hear him through the layers of despair wrapping her tight? He needed to believe she could fight. In a flash, he sensed her presence flicker before him, and he spun around. The crystals flickered, casting ghostly reflections that danced around them like taunting sprites. He caught a glimpse of her, shadows swirling around her body, pulling her deeper into the void. Her expression, half panic, half resignation, cut through him like glass. "I can't hold on much longer," she cried, her eyes pleading. "No. Stay with me." He reached out again, pushing past the encroaching darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. Sweat dripped down his brow, slick with fear, but he pressed on. Stronger, he had to be stronger. The laughter rose to a maddening crescendo. "This way leads to your salvation or her doom," the voice spat from the depths of the cavern. It echoed and twisted, wrapping around Ben and squeezing him like a vice. "Enough!" he roared, feeling a surge of anger override his fear. He charged forward, yanking Clara toward the door as though it were a lifeline. "We're escaping. Together." The ground quaked again, unleashing shards of rock that fell like daggers around him. He stumbled, losing his balance but not his grip. "Hold on." "No, Ben." Clara gasped, a moment of clarity shining through her fear. "It's too late for me. You need to go." "Don't say that. We can still go." The anguish in her tone shattered him. Tears streamed down his cheeks as the shadows slithered around her waist. They were pulling her beneath the surface, the abyss opening its maw like a beast ready to consume. Ben felt his heart constrict. What if it was too late? The darkness clawed at his thoughts, whispering promises of peace if he would just let go. But he fought against it, knew he had to remain focused. He wouldn't be dragged down without a fight. With sheer desperation, he lunged again, digging his fingers into the ground, pulling himself closer. "I won't lose you." But every inch felt like a mile. The shadows shrieked, an unholy sound that echoed through the cavern, their grip tightening around her. "Join us, and you shall be free." A spark ignited in Clara's eyes, potent but flickering. "Ben," she started, then wavered. "I don't know how much longer I can resist together." "Fight it with me," he cried, adrenaline propelling him forward. She hesitated, and in that brief moment, something shifted within the cavern. The crystals, vibrant moments ago, dulled, a mirror reflecting their desperation. The door pulsed with energy, flickering promises of escape. "Trust me." Their eyes locked, and he felt the thrum of her heartbeat through their linked fingers. She hesitated, and then the light flickered again, as if the door sensed her resolve. "Okay. Okay." Clara cried, determination lodging itself between the shadows. The shadows recoiled momentarily, lashing out in fury. "No!" they screamed, a chorus of rage. "You will be ours." But they surged forward, splashing through darkness. They could either walk into the door or be devoured. The choice pressed heavy on Ben's chest. As Clara stumbled, the shadows snatched at her, teeth bared and hungry for her light. The ground beneath them shuddered, the very essence of the abyss mocking their plight, Ben yelled. Clara, now. Would the doorway lead them to salvation, or was it merely an illusion crafted from pain? The answer loomed, shrouded in shadow as they struggled against their fate. Just trust me. He gasped, pulling her forward, a final lunge toward the unknown. Would the door open wide, or would it slam shut, sealing their fate inside the abyss forever? The darkness roared around them, swelling like a storm as Ben and Clara surged toward the door. It pulsed with an inviting glow, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Dread filled the air like smoke, but Clara's grip tightened around Ben's hand, a signal of determination. They had to push through together. Don't let go. He shouted, feeling shadows gnash around them, desperate for a taste of their light. Time felt distorted as they raced toward the door, the laughs and cries of the shadows clawing at their minds. The air thickened, heavy with despair, yet Ben's heart beat fiercely with purpose. Just as they reached the door, an agonizing roar erupted. Shadows writhed like a tempest, lashing out in fury, threatening to tear them apart. Now! Ben urged, with every fiber of his being pushing them forward. Clara nodded, eyes fierce, pulling him closer as they stepped through the threshold together. Suddenly, the world spun, they stumbled out into a blinding light, collapsing onto the warm grass of a familiar backyard. Fireworks still erupted in the night sky above them, vibrant colors painting the darkness, but the laughter that surrounded them was different now, joyous and genuine. The weight of dread lifted, replaced by the sweet relief of freedom. Ben gasped, disbelief flooding every inch of him. They had made it. He looked around, scanning the neighborhood where the dark shadows had once lurked. No one noticed. Families were gathered, children squealing with delight, their laughter ringing like chimes in the warm evening air. Relief washed over him. But as he turned to Clara, the glow around her flickered softly, shadows still hugging at her edges. Ben, she whispered, her voice trembling once more, I don't think it's over. He grabbed her shoulders, desperation encasing his heart again. We can't let it win. We faced it together. He could feel her fear echoing within him. What do we do? Clara's eyes searched his, battling against the pull of memories from the abyss that lingered like smoke in their minds. We have to tell people. Show them what lurks in the shadows. If we don't face it together, it will come for us and anyone else. At that moment, as the fireworks burst above them in brilliant displays, they understood. Their victory was only a momentary reprieve from the deeper battle against the darkness that sought to claim them. They couldn't let fear return them to silence. Together, they staggered to their feet, brushing off remnants of the fight. One by one, they approached the nearby neighbors, friendly faces blurring at the edges of sight. The joy of the 4th of July couldn't cloud the truth. They were united in their experience, drawn together by the chilling legacy of that eve. Shooting stars. Look! A child shouted, pointing toward the sky. Ben's heart raced. This was the moment that could define everything. Listen, everyone. He shouted, the urgency in his voice sharp as ice. Something awful happened tonight. We need to be vigilant. Curious but excited glances pinged between adults as children continued to celebrate, unaware of what loomed beneath. Clara stepped forward, the shadows still whispering at her back, but her voice was steadfast. There's darkness that feeds off the joyful laughter. We need to protect our families. Whispers surged among the neighbors, uncertainty mixing with interest. Fear seemed to warp reality as recognition settled in their expressions. A consciousness began to stir. The mocking laughter from the abyss was now tinged with urgency, demanding attention. Together, we can stay safe. Ben added, hands raised, determination blazing through him. We can face it. We've already found strength in each other. We just have to talk, share, and stay united. As eyes turned toward one another, a realization sparkled through the crowd. Their camaraderie could form a shield, heartened by shared understanding and determination. They could fight against the whispers, the secrets, the shadows. The fireworks exploded overhead, now a celebration of hope rather than fear. And for the first time since that horrific descent into the dark, Ben felt a spark of true light reigniting. The night surged with laughter and spirit, an anthem of defense against the ever-lurking shadows. He pressed his shoulder against Clara's, finding strength in their bond. Together, they would not be just victims but victors, sharing a legacy of survival. As the last of the fireworks faded, he turned to her. "We'll be all right." With one final glance into the darkness that had tried to take them, Ben felt resolve surge. They would not forget where they'd been, they would fight on, together. United against the shadows, buoyed by shared hope, they stepped further into the bright night, hearts pounding with the promise of life anew, a promise they would never let the darkness eat away. Now, as the fireworks painted the sky, the real battle began. And so, dear friends, you need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that LL unveil even more harrowing tales. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm. This is the moment to show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions, thoughts, and theories about this wild journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Let us grow this community.